A group of arrogant businessmen laugh and mock a black woman outside a rooftop bar, humiliating her in front of her quiet husband. But what they don't realize is, they just picked a fight with the wrong man. He's not just a security consultant. He's a former elite government combat specialist. What happens next will leave them stunned and teach a powerful lesson about respect, love, and strength. The night was crisp and electric in Paris, the kind of evening where the city felt alive with possibility. Rose Jackson stood on the rooftop of Le Ciel, a chic bar perched atop a boutique hotel in the 8th arrondissement. The Eiffel Tower loomed in the distance, its golden light painting the skyline, while the Seine glittered below like a ribbon of black glass. At 34, Rose was a vision. Her deep brown skin glowed under the soft ambient lighting, her tailored blazer and silk blouse a testament to her polished confidence. She'd spent the last decade clawing her way up from a modest Atlanta upbringing to become a senior partner at Moreau & Associates, a powerhouse international law firm with offices across Europe. Tonight, though, she wasn't the fierce litigator who'd dismantled CEOs in courtrooms. She was just Rose, laughing with her husband, Marcus, over a glass of champagne. Marcus Jackson leaned against the railing beside her, his quiet presence a steady anchor. At 38, he was a man of few words, his lean frame clad in a simple black sweater and dark jeans. His close-cropped hair and calm, steady gaze gave him an air of understated strength. He worked as a security consultant, freelance, low-profile gigs that kept him out of the spotlight. To Rose, he was her rock, the man who'd seen her through late-night case prep and celebrated her victories with quiet pride. Tonight was their first proper date in weeks, a rare escape from their demanding lives. "So I told their lead counsel," Rose was saying, her voice bright with amusement, "if you think burying me in 500 pages of discovery is going to scare me off, you clearly don't know who you're dealing with." She grinned, taking a sip of her drink. The judge shut them down in 10 minutes flat. Marcus smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're a force, Rose. Always have been." She nudged him playfully. "And you're my secret weapon, keeping me sane through all of it." Their moment of warmth was shattered by a sudden burst of noise from across the rooftop. A group of 6 men in expensive suits stumbled out of a private room, their laughter loud and abrasive, cutting through the smooth jazz floating over the bar. They were in their mid-40s, all white, their faces flushed with alcohol and arrogance. Rose glanced over, her lawyer's instincts noting the details. Tailored Brioni suits, Rolex watches glinting on their wrists, the unmistakable swagger of corporate power. She caught snippets of their conversation, crude jokes about their latest merger, boasts about bonuses, and pegged them as tech executives, likely from one of the American firms expanding into Europe. "Let's just ignore them," she murmured to Marcus, turning back to the view. But the group's orbit shifted, their voices growing louder as they approached. One of them, a stocky man with slicked-back graying hair and a paunch straining his shirt, stumbled into their space, his drink sloshing onto the floor. His bloodshot eyes landed on Rose, and a smirk twisted his lips. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice thick with mockery. "Didn't know they let the help up here. You serving drinks, sweetheart? Or just lost?" Rose's spine stiffened, her jaw tightening. She'd heard worse. Back in law school, in boardrooms, even on the streets of Paris. But it never stopped stinging. She turned to face him, her tone sharp and controlled. "Excuse me?" The man's friends laughed, a chorus of hyenas egging him on. Another one, taller, with a ruddy face and a tie loosened around his thick neck, stepped closer. "Oh, she talks back. Cute. What's your rate, honey? We've got a party going. Could use some entertainment." Marcus shifted beside her, his hand tightening around his glass. But he stayed silent, his eyes locked on the group. Rose, however, wasn't about to let it slide. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her voice cutting through the noise like a gavel. "I'm a lawyer, not your servant, and I suggest you walk away before you embarrass yourselves further." The stocky man snorted, his smirk widening. "A lawyer? Sure, darling. Affirmative action's really scraping the bottom these days, huh?" His gaze flicked to Marcus, who'd been watching with unnerving calm. "And what's this guy? Your bodyguard? Or just here to carry your bags?" The group erupted again, their laughter sharp and cruel, slicing through the night air. Rose felt the familiar burn of rage, the kind she'd swallowed 1,000 times growing up black in the South, proving herself in rooms where she was the only one who looked like her. She'd faced down judges, CEOs, and racists alike. But tonight was supposed to be different. A night off. A night with Marcus. She took a steadying breath, her hand brushing his arm. "Marcus, let's go. They're not worth it." But Marcus didn't move. His glass clinked softly as he set it on the railing, the sound deliberate, precise. When he spoke, his voice was low, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. "Apologize to my wife." The stocky man blinked, then laughed louder, a harsh, barking sound. "Oh, this is rich. What are you gonna do, tough guy? Cry about it?" He shoved Marcus's shoulder, a sloppy, drunken push meant to provoke. What happened next was a blur of motion, so fast Rose barely processed it. Marcus caught the man's wrist mid-shove, twisting it with a fluid, practiced motion that dropped him to his knees. A choked gasp escaped the executive's throat as Marcus stepped forward, his presence suddenly towering despite his lean build. The ruddy-faced man lunged, swinging a wild fist, but Marcus sidestepped effortlessly, grabbed his arm, and flipped him onto the glass table nearby. It shattered under his weight with a deafening crash, sending shards skittering across the rooftop. The other four froze, their bravado evaporating as Marcus turned to face them. His movements were precise, lethal, a stark contrast to the quiet man Rose had known for years. She'd heard bits of his past, military service before they met, a vague mention of security training, but he'd always brushed it off. "Just some old habits," he'd say with a shrug. Now she saw the truth. This wasn't just training. This was elite, government-honed skill, the kind that marked a man forever. "Anyone else?" Marcus asked, his voice still calm, but there was an edge now, a promise of more if they pushed him. The stocky man scrambled to his feet, clutching his wrist, his face a mask of pain and humiliation. You're crazy! Do you know who we are? We're with Technova. You'll regret this." "I don't care," Marcus said, stepping closer, his eyes locked on the man's. "I know who she is, and you don't get to talk to her like that." Rose's heart pounded, a mix of pride and shock coursing through her. She grabbed his arm, her voice firm but steady. "Marcus, enough. They're done." He hesitated, his gaze flickering to her, then nodded. The storm in his eyes receded as he stepped back, his shoulders relaxing. The executives, sobered by fear, muttered curses and stumbled toward the exit, the stocky man shouting about lawsuits and calling the embassy. The bar's security arrived, 2 burly men in black, but Rose waved them off with the authority of someone used to commanding a room. "We're fine. They're leaving." As the crowd dispersed, whispering and staring, Rose pulled Marcus to a quiet corner near the edge of the rooftop. The city stretched out below them, oblivious to the drama above. Her hands framed his face, searching his eyes. "What the hell was that, Marcus? Where did that come from?" He exhaled, the tension draining from him like water through a sieve. Old habits. I didn't want you to see that side of me. Side of you? She pressed, her voice rising slightly. Marcus, you just took down two guys like it was nothing. What were you, a spy, special forces? What? He gave a small, reluctant smile, his hands settling on her waist. Something like that. Long time ago, I was trained by people who don't mess around. I left it behind, or thought I did. She shook her head, a laugh escaping despite herself. You're full of surprises, you know that? 6 years, and I didn't know my husband was a badass. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I'd do it again. For you. They don't get to disrespect you, Rose. Not while I'm here. Her anger softened, replaced by a warmth that anchored her. She kissed him, brief but fierce, then stepped back. Come on, let's get out of here. They left Le Ciel hand in hand, the confrontation fading into the background as they descended to the street. The night air was cool along the Seine, the water reflecting the city's lights in a dance of gold and shadow. Rose squeezed Marcus's hand, her mind still reeling. You think they learned anything tonight? He shrugged, his quiet demeanor slipping back into place like a familiar coat. Maybe, maybe not. But it's not about them. It's about us, she smiled, leaning into him as they walked. Us against the world, huh? Always, he said. And they kept moving, their shadows stretching long into the night. The days that followed buzzed with whispers. The incident at Le Ciel made its way onto X, where posts ranged from justice served to entitled execs cry foul. Someone had filmed it, shaky footage of Marcus's swift takedown, and it spread like wildfire. Technova issued a vague statement about reviewing the conduct of their employees, but no charges were filed. Money and connections shielded the executives, as they always did, though their stock dipped 3% amid the scandal. Rose returned to her cases, Marcus to his consulting, their lives resuming with a quiet strength. But the echoes lingered. Rose knew this wasn't the end. Racism didn't vanish with a single lesson. Those men would wake up tomorrow, nursing bruises and egos, and maybe they'd think twice before opening their mouths again. Or maybe they'd double down, blaming her, blaming Marcus, blaming a world that dared to challenge their privilege. She'd seen it before, in courtrooms and corner offices, on both sides of the Atlantic. It was a cycle as old as time, one she fought every day with her briefs and her voice. A week later, sitting in her office overlooking the Champs-Élysées, Rose scrolled through X. A post caught her eye. Saw a black woman and her husband shut down some drunk suits in Paris. About time someone stood up. Below it, replies ranged from applause to vitriol, the same tired slurs she'd heard at Le Ciel. She closed her laptop, staring out at the city. Marcus was right. It wasn't about them. It was about her, about him, about every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. That night, over dinner at their cozy apartment in Montmartre, Rose asked him, "You ever miss it? That life?" Marcus paused, his fork hovering over his plate. Sometimes. The adrenaline, the clarity. But this, he gestured between them, this is better. Harder, but better. She reached for his hand, her fingers lacing through his. Good answer. Outside, Paris hummed on, a city of beauty and scars. Somewhere, another Rose faced the same slurs. Another Marcus held back his fury, or didn't. The cycle churned, unbroken, a question hanging in the air. When would it stop? And who would stop it? The answer wasn't clear, not yet. But as Rose and Marcus sat together, their love a quiet rebellion against the world, it felt like a start.